Let me introduce our speaker today, Mrs. Babbage, who is a trained counselor and would be able to unpack this subject of grief to us, that we may learn from it, and that we may somehow or to some degree be prepared for grief when it does visit us. Mrs. Babbage.
Good morning, Sabbath School members. Good morning, friends, relatives. It's been a long time since we've met, and I thank God for the privilege to be able to stand in front of you this morning and present this rather not so good a topic, but we are living in times when we cannot avoid talking about grief because it has hit us just like a rocket. From nowhere, it has just come, and somehow we are left with no option but to be talking about it. I know that growing up, we never even used to talk about grief at all, and our young children would never hear anything to do with grief. In fact, when I was growing up, we would run away if we see those cars with a hearse and all, or we would all stand still and you know, not even breathe like we do when we see a motorcade. But now it seems to have like become, it's the norm. So yes, we need to help each other to understand how best we can help each other in such situations. As we are different, we also are going to face grief in different ways. What I'm going to present today is a follow-up to what we have already presented. The first part of this topic is already online. I think you'll be given the link where you can be, you'll be able to listen to it. So I will be referring a lot to what I have said, but I will just sum up, or rather give a brief summary of what we discussed as we move on. So our topic today is grief. And what is grief? This was explained in detail in the first presentation that I did with the elder. So you cannot talk of grief without bringing in loss or bereavement and mourning. So those are some of the terms that I would like us to understand so that we can be able to help each other and bring awareness to what exactly we are dealing with. Loss or bereavement is the condition of being deprived, of being robbed, or even of being torn apart from something or someone very important to oneself. And when I say very important, it's all about relationships. What bonds have we built with those that have departed, or even with something that you have lost? So it's all about the strength of the bonds. So when I'm saying strength, I want you to understand that when we are talking about grief, it's not going to be one size fits all because of the relationship aspect that comes with it. So its examples are losing a spouse, losing a child, losing a friend, losing a job, losing a pet for some of us, and it could even be losing a limb, losing an arm, a hand, being divorced, going on a separation. All those are points of grief. They are points of bereavement because they are a bereavement, they are a loss. Something has happened. There's been a detachment of some sort or a deprivation of some sort. Now, grief is the psychological experience of loss, such as, and it has characters such as depression, deep sadness, shock, denial, numbness, disbelief, anger, helplessness, and sometimes guilt. You know, the painful part is when guilt is also part of it. What it is, it's actually basically the intense emotional and physical reaction to loss. So grief is a self-healing way of recovering from a loss. That's what grief is all about. But then comes again the next aspect of grief. So there are three words that we are talking about: bereavement, grief, and mourning. Now, what is mourning? Mourning is the public or outward expression of grief. We all know, we probably all have always identified grief with mourning because that's what we see. It's physical, we see it, it's outward, it's visible. So it's characterized by things like weeping, certain dress. In our culture, we wear black to symbolize that we are mourning. In some cultures, they wear white. which talks of purity of life or entrance into new life. There's a lot of things that come because of culture. So it is a way of expressing our thoughts and our feelings through art, some of us, and through music, praying, journaling. Some people write a lot when they are going through grief. And that's how we outwardly demonstrate or express our grief. Now, having said that, there are things that we need to, in summarizing what all this that I was talking about has been given in detail in the first presentation. So in summary, grief is a natural and universal response to loss. It is not a state or a status or a position. It's a process. Take note, it's a process. So don't expect it to come and say maybe you are giving yourself a day or a month and it will be gone. It is a process and it might take quite a time. Many people may recover adequately within a year after the loss, but for some individuals, the process may be extended or even complicated. Please take time to visit the first presentation as it explains the types of losses, the types of griefs. That's where you will find the complicated griefs, what its characters are. Everything is in there. Loss and bereavement, or bereavement is objective and observable, like I already said. You can actually see the loss. It is something that you can adequately put your hand to and say, yes, this is a loss or bereavement. On the other hand, grief is subjective. It is an individual's experience. Your experience and my experience can never be the same. Even if we were twins, it will never be the same. So grief itself is subjective in that it is individual and it affects us differently. So grief experience can be positive or negative depending on how we respond to it. Let me recap on what I've just said. Grief is inevitable as confirmed in James 4 verse 14, where it says, whereas you know not what shall be on the morrow, for what is your life? It is even vapor that appears for a little time and then vanishes away. That in its own is telling us that grief is here with us and is going to be here with us. It's in the Bible. We were just being given warning that we are not here to stay. So with that in mind, we are already aware that at some point, each and every one of us is going to go through grief. We are never prepared when a loss happens. No one plans grief to with all the details that you expect to. In fact, we don't even want to plan grief. I was just talking this morning with my aunt who was talking about, she was asking for a papers for Glen Forest because she bought a graves a while back. And at the time that she did that, the family was up in arms saying, are you sick? Are you not telling us what is going on? Why have you bought a grave at Glen Forest? It's things that we can plan for, but not in detail, So we are never prepared when it does happen. There are different ways that one can experience bereavement, as already explained, and you will also find them in our first presentation. The type of loss, in most cases, will determine the type of grief. So all those things we need to take into account when we are talking about grief. When I say type of loss, it could be a suicide, it could be an accident. You leave home in the morning and you have said your goodbyes to your children, you're going to work, and within 5 minutes, we receive a phone call, oh, your mommy has passed away. So you see, this is what I'm saying. It's the type of loss and how it has happened, the timing, everything that goes with it will determine the type of grief. Every loss deserves its own time of grieving, especially in multiple losses. I will also refer you back to the first presentation, where you will be told about all losses, the type of losses, and the secondary, the primary losses, all those. You need to attend to them individually because they have a special part in your life. They cannot be grouped together and say, I am grieving, even if people died in the same accident, your brother and your mother or your sister or your spouse. There's no way you are expected to just group it together and make it one grief and say you are grieving. You need to give them their specific times because of the positions they held in your life. Okay. I don't know, are we together?
Yes.
All right. And then there are no timelines in grieving. Please don't give each other timelines when it comes to grieving. We are just there to support each other when it comes to grieving. You cannot give somebody time. Various factors can influence the grieving process: nature, timing, age, belief system, financial attachment. You know, a lot of things can come into play when it comes to grief. So don't give each other a timeline. Grief can have significant impact on the body and the mind, which is where we are starting today. The effects of grief on the body and the mind. And the other parts that we are going to deal with are how we can cope with grief. But what I would like to cover is how we can help each other, what to do and what not to do when you are comforting somebody, what to say and what not to say. Okay, so not everyone who experiences a loss will go through all the highlights that I'm going to talk about. The stages will not necessarily be experienced in that chronological order that we will talk about. And every person is unique and has a different coping skill, and thus will grieve differently from the next person. So what I'm talking about are the stages of grief as given by Kubler-Ross. I will talk about them as we move on. So the first one that I want to deal with is denial. When bereavement hits you like a rock on your head, the first thing that we try and do is to deny that it has happened. You automatically tell yourself, it can't be. It couldn't have been. We just said goodbyes just now, about 2 minutes, 5 minutes. It can be. That's denial. So it's the body's defense mechanism that helps us cope with the same situation that we've just received. So it is the body's mechanism. It's already trying to defend itself from what has happened. And then the next thing that comes is shock. Shock is listed as one of those the major ailments that can hit us. You know, where you have heart attacks, where you have stroke, you have shock is one of them. So I just want you to imagine what it's doing to you. At this point in time, you've just received news, and you still haven't understood exactly what is going on. You are trying to understand what's going on. Your system is denying it, and the next thing that hits you is just shock. Now, shock paralyzes you. You don't know what to do next. You are just sitting there. In fact, most people, when you attend accidents, when you are doing first aid, the first thing that you need to deal with is shock, because it can actually kill you. Now, that's the next thing that happens. And then as time moves on, you probably have people coming or phoning and asking you if it's true or trying to comfort you and sympathize. You try and avoid it. Sometimes we don't even want to answer our telephones. We try by all means to avoid what is happening because you are still trying to understand what is happening to you. So the next stage is avoidance. You are still in denial. All this, remember, is part of denial. You are avoiding the inevitable. You are trying by all means. And confusion sets in. You try and take the keys. You want to go to the scene of the accident. You are just going round in circles in the house. You don't know what is happening. And then suddenly, fear hits you. Because you don't know what to expect. You are just going somewhere where you've heard the accident has happened. You are already imagining things in your head. What kind of accident was it? Am I going to find my mom or my spouse in the condition that I can identify them? Can you see? A lot of things are already going on. Now, this is all denial, which is the first stage that I'm talking about when it comes to grief. Then something else happens in you. You are angry. You become very angry and frustrated. Who are you angry with? Probably my friend who has just departed, my spouse. I'm angry with him because he has suddenly just deserted me. I'm looking at it as if it's desertion. So, I I'm going through a lot of emotions as it is. I'm frustrated, I'm irritated, and you find this is not the time to be trying to comfort somebody, because remember, they are trying to also go through all these emotions. We need to give them time. There's a lot that is going on. I'm sure as I'm talking, you are already imagining the scenes as they are happening, as they are unfolding, and wondering what happens. And then you are irritated, you are anxious, you don't know what is going to happen next. The next stage that we are talking about, or that will hit us now, is we start to bargain. Is there anything that I should have done? Or anything that I could have done to avoid this situation? Or is there anything I can do now to avoid what has happened? I'm bargaining, I'm trying to find solutions, trying to find meaning to what has happened to me, what has just hit me. I'm negotiating my way, I'm trying to negotiate my way out of this situation. You know, you are bargaining. You're trying everything that you can. You actually imagine it's a bad dream, and you are going to wake up and see that it was just a bad dream. It was a nightmare. You know, all this is happening in one person. Within a short space of time, you are having to go through all these things. And then you are trying to reach out for emotional support. You look around you to see if there's somebody that feels what you are feeling. But you don't see it because you are just in your own world. And yes, there are always people that are there to try and go through what you are going through, but they can never understand what you are going through because this is your experience, not theirs. Okay? So, the next thing that might happen is depression will hit you. Depression. As the reality of the loss suddenly hits you and it finally grips you, it registered that this is for real. Your sister has just arrived. Your brother is there and trying to comfort you. Even with COVID, we still have 2 or 3 people that will come and visit you and be with you. It suddenly hits you that this is real. It's reality. It has happened. Your greatest fears have just happened. What are you feeling now? You feel overwhelmed. You know, that intense sadness, it comes over you. And then suddenly, you are helpless, you are hopeless. You are already trying to imagine a lot of things. You have this urge to run. Run where to? You don't know where to run to. But all these are things that are happening as we are facing grief. So that's depression. You will go through all those things. And then the next stage that we might have to go through is acceptance. Because before we accept, you want to move on. You can't do anything. Remember, these stages are not happening within 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days. No. It could be months. It could be a month. It could be 2 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years for some people. And then you suddenly want to accept. You are trying by all means to accept what has happened, but you feel like you are betraying your dearly departed. You know, acceptance is so difficult because in a way you feel like you're betraying somebody. You loved them so dearly, you cannot think of even moving on. How would they feel? How would they have thought? You know, we know the state of the dead, but these emotions will not stop going through you just because you know the state of the dead. You had a relationship with somebody and suddenly they are not there. So you feel like you cannot move on. You attempt to maintain a life that you always had with them. You attempt a lot of things. You seek solutions, realistic solutions to your problems. And then you try and readjust. Sometimes you move furniture there. You probably want to move house. You probably want to go and visit somebody to just get away from the environment for a short while. A lot of things are happening. And sometimes you try and hide away from people. You know, you are trying to make out life yourself, to try and find out what exactly has happened. You start to get involved with some things that you had not been aware of in a long time. You had detached yourself from those things. You begin to try and form new relationships. And even then, there's a bit of guilt and not wanting to do it because you still feel you are betraying somebody. And then, by God's grace, we may begin to live again and be able to laugh. This could be within a year, 2 years, a month for some, 2 months for some. That's when you get to the stage of acceptance. So what am I saying? I'm saying while people are grieving, allow them time to go through. And like I said in the introduction, not everyone will go through these stages. Confirm I've just gone 26 minutes? Oh, no. Okay. Not everyone will go through these stages in the same pace. So, and no, they won't all go according to what I have presented, but you might have to go through all of them individually. And by God's grace, you'll be able to cope, just like most of us have gone through and we have managed to cope. So our stages are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and finally acceptance. Let me try and rush, because there are some parts that I feel we need to go through a bit fast. So grief can have a significant impact, like I said, physically, emotionally, to our body and our mind. Now, the body can be so weakened that the griever can be left vulnerable to all the infectious diseases. That's where you find somebody's got flu today and tomorrow they've got... You have a lot of things, and according to researchers, this is the brain's initial response also that it puts to the body. A protective shift that you get, and it's a hormone called cortisol that is released into your body in order to protect you. I called it there a combat mode. When you are in that combat mode, you can do a lot of things. You are trying to cope. You find some even forget they are grieving, they run around, they do that, they are running around with the papers, and others are watching and thinking, but this person should be relaxing and taking things easy. But you have been put in that mode because of your body, which has released this chemical. And the unfortunate thing is when the body remains in this mode for a longer period, it can actually cause emotional and health challenges, even to the extent of having disorders. But when grief is not accorded or attended to with awareness and compassion, the effects can bring dysfunction. So what we are doing is we are giving each other awareness of what happens when somebody is grieving, so that we don't rush people into grieving, through the grief process. Now, let me just go faster on this. I'll put them there so you can also read. The emotional symptoms that a griever may have, they may start acting differently from what you were used to. They may withdraw from the public, self-isolate. They will have difficult concentrating. Some people have tried to relieve their grief by going back to work, for those that are employed, and they've gone there and found they are not able to cope. They cannot concentrate, they cannot do anything. And some can have thoughts of even harming themselves, you know. And some have turned to drug use or drug abuse. All those are some symptoms that when we see them, let's not judge. Let's try and help people that are going through these emotions, because this will happen when somebody is grieving. And then we have the mental effects. Grief can trigger a number of mental health symptoms and issues. These might include depression, loss of interest in pleasurable activities, loss of appetite, loss of sleep, hopelessness, sadness, excessive crying, sometimes fatigue, mood swings, and a lot of loneliness that comes with it. Fragmented sleep, lack of social connections, spending more time on social networking sites or on online games. Some of those are all symptoms, but we just look at them and we don't take note. And then there's anxiety that also comes in. You have a lot of restlessness. You always imagine the worst is going to happen because the worst has already happened to you. And you keep imagining that. Sometimes you have fast heartbeats, you have hyperventilation. A lot of things happen to you because of the fact that you are now grieving. Some of the physical effects that we will see are a lot of exhaustion, like I have mentioned, because our immune system has been compromised. We will have a lot of that. Appetite can also be affected, which means I might begin to lose weight or gain weight. And instead of talking about it, let's help each other. Let's understand where they are coming from. Let's understand what could have caused all that, and not start pointing fingers or talking about each other in the back, because this might happen. gaining of weight or losing of weight because somebody is not eating well, somebody is not sleeping well, somebody is not having a nutritional diet, and all this can happen. So it can also cause physical pains. Grief can manifest in physical pains such as headaches and the flus, backache. Sometimes somebody won't even get up. They've suddenly got a backache that's hurting them so much. It's all this lack of sleep. Remember, when we sleep, the body heals itself. That's the time that the body heals itself. But you find when you are in the process of grieving, instead of sleeping, you are busy working out what to do. Remember, a lot of things have happened. The one common thing with all loss or all bereavement is change. A lot of things have changed. So you will have to try and reassign responsibilities or take some responsibilities that you never used to have. So there's a lack of sleep. There's a lack of body repairing itself. There's also a specific temporal syndrome brought on by the death of a loved one called broken heart syndrome, and it mimics the effects of a heart attack. So let's be aware of all those things so that we'll be able to help each other. But not, this can be temporal. Now, I've already spoken about all this, and I think because of our time, I will rush through this because I've spoken about them already, because they are issues that we need to talk about. Spiritual effects. Some people then begin to examine their spiritual beliefs. And some people believe something has happened bad to them, even as we read in the history books or even in the Bible. Bad things, when they happen, they were associated to you having angered God, or in the spiritual world, the spirits. They are angry with you. You'll find most of the rituals that are actually done for funerals, most of these worldly funerals, is to try and appease the spirits. So you find there's a lot of searching for your spiritual beliefs. And then some experience dreams. That lack of sleep continues to come. The dreams of your loved ones. Sometimes you actually feel their presence or even hear their voices. So these are things that some people will go through, some may never, ever go through those. Now, how do we cope with grief? Grief, the important thing is not to avoid it or to suppress it. You need to try and allow yourself to go through grief. Give yourself time, space to mourn. And we need to embrace the grieving process in whatever order it comes. Those that are around us are encouraged to assist and help and just be there as the support system that is required. Let me try and rush through this. Coping with grief. Most people find crying relieves them. It is natural to cry, and expressing emotions can add to the healing process. We all know that most people will cry, but in some cultures, some people won't cry. In fact, maybe even in our cultures, the men have been brought up and we're told that men don't cry. So if you are told, you grow up being told as a little boy you shouldn't cry, that might actually derail your grief, and it might even draw you back a while. Looks like my time is up, right? Oh, okay. Some people find comfort in writing. You need to connect with your emotions, spend quality time with yourself sometimes. Do something special for yourself every day. Go for walks, eat healthy, rest. Pray a lot and talk to God, because that's where most of our comfort will come from. Because even as humans, as we try to comfort one another, sometimes we do and say all the wrong things. Stay connected. Accept help, all the offers of help. Talk about your loved ones. Create positive memories. Grieving during the pandemic may be difficult, but make an effort to stay connected with loved ones and your significant others. Virtually, we all have been doing that virtually, and we are able to do that. However, we view it, having faith can have a very positive effect following grief and loss, and can help in finding meaning in life again. Faith is the gate between the peril and God's power. Okay? Just as two people are different, we are all not going to grieve the same. So don't compare your grief to the next person's grief. And let's not expect others to grieve as fast or as slow as we have done. How can we support those that are grieving? Keep in touch with them. They might not be able to give you the first call, but you are encouraged to keep in touch if you are really caring about your loved ones. Allow your grieving friend to mourn. Have big ears, big eyes. Watch their conditions, all these symptoms we've spoken about, so that you can be of some assistance. Be attentive. Listening attentively when you are talking to them. Give them feedback. And then they will know that you are there for them, right? Okay, keep silent if you do not know what to say. Remember Job's friends? They sat with Job for 7 days and 7 nights and said absolutely nothing. Why? Because they realized his grief was so deep. We are encouraged to do that. We don't necessarily have to say anything. Please, somebody show me when I'm only 5 minutes left so that I don't take more time. Offer practical help. What can I do for you? Is it 5 already? Oh my goodness me. Okay, let me rush. I want us to know what not to say. What not to say. This is the part that I really wanted us to touch. At least she lived to be old, and many people have died young. Please don't ever say that. Don't. That's the worst thing you can ever say to somebody who's grieving, who's lost a mother, who is 100 years. Yes, it's my mother, and she's lived to be 100 years. You don't tell me that. She's in a better place, says who? At this point in time, I don't want to hear that. That's not what I want to hear when I'm grieving. He brought it upon himself. Honestly, he might have, but he's still my loved one, and I had a relationship with them. So don't say that. These are some of the things that you don't say. God has done his bidding. Really? Some people will accept it from a pastor, but honestly, it's not the right time for you to say it. And I don't want to hear that when I'm grieving. Are you telling me that God is happy that I'm grieving? No. So, get over it. Get over it. You mean still grieving over him up to today? Like I said, did you see what is happening? So some of those things, we say them unaware, or we do them unaware, and we don't realize what is going on and how much hurt we are causing the next person. Or you can have another child. No child can ever replace another child. So when I've lost my child, don't tell me I'm still young, I can have another child, because it doesn't help me, it doesn't comfort me. Okay? So she was too good, and God wanted her to be with him. Really? Those are some of the statements we don't really want to hear. Not when you are grieving. I know how you are feeling. You can never know how somebody who's grieving is feeling. You might have lost a father, and if I lose my father, you don't know how I'm feeling. You don't know the relationship I had with my dad. You don't know what happened prior to that. You don't know what conversations I had with him prior to that. So don't compare and don't tell me you know, because you don't know. Okay? She completed her God-given duties, and it was a time to go. These are all Christian statements, not. And we say them thinking we are doing the best, we are comforting. We are not comforting. We are adding salt onto the injury. Okay? Be strong. Did you hear where we came from? All that we were talking about, all that we were saying. And you are expecting me to be strong. You don't know what is going on within me. So, okay, let's go on first to what to say. I am so sorry for your loss. I wish I had the right words to say, but I just want you to know that I care. Sometimes just a rub, you know. You can sit there quietly, rubbing somebody, and they will understand you. In fact, they will understand you better, because you sit in silence like Job's friends did. So, grief, I'm going to omit the grief triggers. I'm just going to summarize. These are reminders that elicit strong emotions that take you back to the time when you were grieving. And then we have, there can be anything. Like in the past 2-3 days, the Zimbabwe Doctors Association came up with a video or something and posted it on the doctors that passed away because of COVID. That, because I lost a dad in that scenario as well, and my mom was taken back to when it first happened. So you find these are triggers, and you cannot control them. So you just need to know what are your triggers when you are grieving. Unresolved issues. This is where forgiveness comes in. Grief cannot be rushed, in closing, but with love and compassion. So what am I doing here? I was appealing for your compassion. When you are going to comfort somebody, please be compassionate. You don't know exactly what they are going through. Above all, although grief is inevitable, we need to walk through it. We need not walk through it alone, because God is near in the midst of our pain and sadness. Psalms 34 verse 18, the Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. And he heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. He is also a present help in our times of need, our refuge indeed. So, my prayer and my wish for all of us is that the next time we are trying to comfort somebody, we will be compassionate about it and realize what grief is all about. We now probably not know everything, but we understand what happens when somebody is grieving. And may the Lord add a blessing to the reading of his word as he gives us more compassion that we might be able to help one another.